Ethan Cole stood at the edge of the landing ramp and stared at the alien city in front of him. The air was thick and warm, and it smelled like spice and metal. Tall, sharp towers made of black stone and glowing blue glass rose into the clouds. The ground under his boots was smooth and white, almost like polished bone. Around him, crowds of aliens moved quickly, their long robes brushing the ground, their strange eyes flashing with colors he did not understand. Claire Morgan stood just. Behind him, arms crossed, looking calm as always. She was taller than Ethan and carried herself like someone who had seen too many battles to be afraid of anything anymore. Her eyes moved over the city, taking everything in. She did not smile. But Ethan thought she was impressed. She just would not say it out loud. "You ready for this?" she asked in a quiet voice. Ethan swallowed hard and nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." 2 Varathi guards stood at the base of the ramp, waiting for them. They were huge creatures, with skin like dark stone and long curved horns on their heads. Their armor looked heavy, but it did not seem to slow them down. They carried long staffs tipped with silver blades. Their faces were impossible to read. One of the guards spoke in a deep rumbling voice. "The council waits. Follow," Claire gave Ethan a small nod, and they walked down the ramp together. The city was even more strange, up close. The streets were full of merchants selling glowing orbs, jars of thick purple liquid, and cages of strange creatures with too many legs. Little machines floated in the air, buzzing softly as they cleaned or delivered messages. Alien children ran past them, their laughter sharp and echoing. Ethan kept his eyes straight ahead, trying not to stare too much. He could feel the weight of the Varathi's gaze on him. They walked up a long staircase made of dark stone that seemed to hum under his feet. At the top of the stairs was a massive gate carved with symbols he could not read. It opened with a deep, grinding sound, revealing the great hall of the council. Inside, the hall was lit by hanging crystals that glowed pale blue. The walls were covered in murals that showed great battles and hunts. A long black carpet stretched from the doors to the far end of the room, where a semicircle of tall chairs stood on a raised platform. The chairs were occupied by the elders of the Varathi, each one larger and more imposing than the guards outside. Their horns were longer, their armor more ornate, and their eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. The air in the hall was heavy and silent. Ethan felt his throat tighten, but he kept walking beside Claire. When they reached the center of the room, the guards stopped and stepped back. Claire and Ethan stood alone on the black carpet, facing the council. One of the elders leaned forward. Slightly, his voice was deep and full of authority. "Humans, you stand before the council of the Varathi. Your kind seeks alliance, but words mean little here. Strength and cunning are what we respect." Claire met the elder's gaze without flinching. "We understand. That is why we are here." A ripple of low laughter ran through the council. Another elder spoke, her voice sharper, almost mocking. "You say you understand, yet no human has set foot on our world before. You are soft, you are fragile. We have crushed stronger species than yours." Ethan felt his face grow warm, but Claire only raised an eyebrow. "If that's what you believe, then why invite us at all?" The elders exchanged glances. The first one answered, his tone almost amused now. "Because we enjoy watching the unworthy fail, and because our traditions demand we give every challenger a chance to prove themselves." With a gesture from one of the elders, a door on the side of the hall opened. A group of younger Varathi entered, pushing a large holographic display into view. The image showed a massive creature in a rocky arena. It was a terrifying beast, bigger than a tank, with armored scales, long claws, and a mouth full of teeth-like blades. It moved with a predator's grace, crushing stones beneath its feet as if they were nothing. The elder's voice boomed through the hall. This is the Tyreek, the apex beast of our world. No outsider has survived more than a few moments against it. If you wish to earn our respect, you will face it. Ethan stared at the image, his stomach twisting into a knot. The thing was a monster. No human could fight that and win. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Claire, however, did not even blink. She studied the hologram calmly, her eyes following the creature's movements. After a long moment, she looked back at the elders. "Fine," she said simply. "I'll do it." The hall fell silent. Even Ethan turned to look at her in shock. "Wait," he whispered. "You're going to fight that thing." Claire glanced at him and gave the faintest hint of a smile. "Someone has to." The elder who had mocked them earlier leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing. You will face the Tyreek alone." Claire nodded. "Alone," the elder laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. "Then you will die quickly." Claire's smile widened just a little. "We'll see." One of the guards stepped forward, looking confused. "Do you require armor? Weapons? What will you take into the arena?" Claire shook her head. "Just a blade and a rope." Ethan stared at her, completely speechless now. The elders muttered among themselves, clearly amused by her request. The first elder raised his hand, silencing them. He looked down at Claire, his expression unreadable. "Very well," he said. "Tomorrow, at first light, you will enter the arena. And when you fail, as you surely will, the council will send you back to your world in shame." Claire gave a small shrug. "Or," she said softly, "you'll send us back as equals." The elder did not answer. Instead, he stood, and with a wave of his hand, the guards moved forward to escort them out of the hall. As they walked back through the city toward the quarters prepared for them, Ethan finally found his voice again. "You're crazy," he said, his voice shaking a little. "You really think you can beat that thing?" Claire glanced at him, her eyes calm and steady. "I don't think," she said. "I know." Ethan could only stare at her as the strange alien lights of the city flickered around them, and the sound of the Tyrak's roar echoed faintly from the hologram still burning in his mind. The next morning. The sun rose over the alien city, casting long shadows across the streets. The air was still warm, but a cool breeze blew through the narrow alleyways, bringing with it the scent of something unfamiliar. Ethan was standing outside their quarters, staring up at the sky. The horizon was dotted with strange, floating ships that drifted like jellyfish in the morning light. It felt like something out of a dream. Claire came up behind him, already dressed in her simple gear. She wore a thin tunic that looked strong enough to withstand a fight, but it didn't seem to slow her down. She had a short blade strapped to her side and a coil of rope tied to her waist. Ethan glanced over at her, but she didn't seem nervous at all. In fact, she seemed completely at ease, as if facing a deadly beast was just another day's work. "Are you sure about this?" Ethan asked, his voice quiet but filled with concern. Claire looked at him, her expression unreadable. "No." Turning back now, "Ethan, but ... that thing, the Tyreek, it's huge. It's not just big, it's a monster," he said, his hands shaking slightly. He tried to hide it, but the fear was there. He had seen the beast on the hologram, and it looked like nothing a human could ever fight. Nothing anyone could fight, really. Claire nodded slowly, then her eyes hardened, her focus returning. You're right, it's a monster. But every monster has a weakness. I just need to find it. Find it, Ethan repeated. How? Claire just shrugged, not answering him directly. Instead, she started walking toward the exit of their quarters. Ethan hesitated for a moment, then followed her. He had no choice. This was happening, whether he liked it or not. They walked through the streets of the city, the massive buildings towering above them. The people of Zelos paid little attention to them as they passed, too busy with their own lives. Ethan couldn't help but feel small, but Claire seemed unaffected by the strange alien world around them. To her, it was just another mission, just another fight. That was why he admired her and feared for her. Soon they reached the edge of the city, where a large crowd had gathered. The area was a wide open space surrounded by high walls of black stone. In the center was a massive arena built into the ground like a giant bowl. At the far end of the arena, a large gate stood open, and beyond it, Ethan could see the shape of the Tyreek moving inside its cage. It was enormous, its body covered in thick, armored scales that shimmered in the sunlight. Its glowing red eyes tracked every movement around it, and its tail flicked back and forth with dangerous speed. This is it, Claire said, her voice steady. Ethan couldn't tear his eyes away from the beast. It looked even more terrifying. Up close, the sheer size of it was enough to make his heart race. He felt a wave of helplessness wash over him, but Claire didn't seem afraid. She just walked toward the arena gate as though this was no different than any other fight she had faced. The guards at the gate stepped aside when they saw her approach. Claire gave them a brief nod, then walked straight into the arena. Ethan stood outside the gate, watching her disappear inside. He didn't know what to do. He could stay here and wait for the worst, or he could try to do something to help. But what could he do? Nothing. Claire was on her own, inside the arena. Claire surveyed the ground. It was a large, open space with rocks and debris scattered around. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. The air in the arena was thick with dust. The Tyreek lay still on the ground, its massive body stretched out like a fallen mountain. Its breathing was slow now, heavy and uneven, but it no longer tried to fight. Claire stood next to it, her blade still in her hand, her chest rising and falling with each breath. Her clothes were torn and dusty, but she didn't seem to notice. She kept her eyes on the beast, as though waiting for it to move again. From outside the arena, the crowd of Varathi watched in silence. They didn't cheer, they didn't speak. It was as if the entire city had stopped to watch this moment. Even Ethan could only stand there, frozen, staring at her. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. The Tyreek was alive but beaten, and Claire was still standing. One of the guards finally moved, stepping toward the gate. His voice was low but carried through the still air. She has subdued it. At those words, murmurs began to spread through the crowd. Some of the Varathi looked angry, others looked confused. A few of them even looked impressed, but all of them kept their eyes on Claire. Inside the arena, Claire slowly lowered her blade and stepped back from the beast. She kept her hands loose, ready in case it tried something. But the Tyreek only let out a weak growl and closed its eyes. She had learned everything she needed to know about it during the fight. It was fast, strong, and deadly, but it also relied on its strength too much. It did not expect someone to think, It did not expect someone to trap it. Claire walked back toward the center of the arena, her boots crunching softly against the dust. Her eyes went to the raised platform where the alien council sat. She could see their glowing eyes staring down at her, but their faces showed nothing. She didn't care. She just stood there, waiting. The elder who had spoken to her yesterday finally rose from his chair. He was taller than the others, with horns that curved high above his head. He stepped forward, his heavy armor clinking with each movement. His voice was deep and sharp when he spoke. "You have done what no outsider has done before. You have subdued the apex beast of our world." And yet, his eyes narrowed. "You have done it without killing." Claire's gaze didn't waver. There was no need to kill it. It wasn't the Tyrac's fault, it was put here. The elder tilted his head slightly. "You speak as though you understand it." "I do," she said simply. "It's just a creature. It wants to survive, just like all of us." There was silence for a moment. Then another elder spoke, her voice cold and sharp. "But how? How did you do this? No being has lasted more than moments against it." Claire shrugged. "I watched it. I studied how it moved. It's fast, but it's predictable. It attacks the same way every time. I use that against it." The sharp-voiced elder let out a low sound, something between a growl and a laugh. "Clever, but cleverness is not always enough." Claire looked at her calmly. Today it was. The council fell silent again. The crowd behind them watched, waiting for someone to speak. Ethan found himself holding his breath. He didn't even realize his hands were clenched until he felt his knuckles ache. He wanted to shout, to cheer, but he stayed quiet. He could see how serious this moment was. The first elder finally spoke again. His voice was quiet now, but it still carried through the arena. "You have proven yourself, and you have proven your species is not as weak as we thought." Claire only nodded. The elder raised one clawed hand, and the gates to the arena opened again. The crowd began to stir, moving back toward the city. Some of them still looked angry. Others nodded to themselves, as if they had learned something new. The guards stepped forward to escort Claire and Ethan back. Ethan met her at the gate. He stared at her for a long moment, then shook his head in disbelief. "You're incredible," he said finally. Claire gave him a small smile, though her eyes were still sharp and focused. "Just observant," she said. "That's all." They walked back through the city as the sun climbed higher in the sky. The streets were quieter now. Some of the aliens they passed gave Claire a second look, their eyes following her as she walked. She ignored them. When they reached their quarters, Claire sat down on the edge of her bed and began cleaning her blade. Ethan sat across from her, still trying to process everything he had seen. "You didn't even seem scared," he said finally. Claire paused, then glanced up at him. "I was. I just didn't let it stop me." "But how did you know what to do?" he asked. She leaned back slightly, her gaze going distant. "When I saw the hologram yesterday, I noticed the Tyreek always charged in straight lines. It was powerful, but it didn't think about what it was doing. It relied on fear. I figured if I didn't panic, and if I could make it trip up just once, I could get the upper hand." Ethan shook his head. "You make it sound easy." Claire smiled faintly. "It wasn't, but monsters are just animals. They can bleed. They can get confused, and they can lose." Ethan watched her quietly. He felt a strange mix of pride and fear when he looked at her. She wasn't just brave, she was something else. Something more. A soft knock at the door broke the silence. One of the guards stood outside, waiting. His face was unreadable, but his tone was formal when he spoke. "The council requests your presence." Claire stood, slipping her blade back into its sheath. "Let's not keep them waiting," she said. Ethan followed her out the door. As they walked back toward the council hall, he noticed the way the guards walked differently around her now, not just as an escort, but almost like a shield. The city itself seemed quieter, as though the people sensed something had changed. When they reached the great hall, the elders were already waiting. They stood this time, their glowing eyes fixed on Claire. The elder with the curved horns spoke first. "You have humbled us," he said. "You have shown us that humans are not only survivors, but thinkers. You saw what others did not, and you acted where others failed." Claire gave a small nod but said nothing. The elder continued. "The beast still lives because of you. That is unusual. Many here see that as weakness, but some of us see it as strength." Ethan felt his chest tighten at those words. He could tell how much they meant, even if the elder's tone stayed formal. The elder stepped forward and looked down at Claire. "Tell us, human, why did you spare the beast? Was it pity, or was it strategy?" Claire met his gaze. Her voice was calm but firm. It was respect. A hush fell over the hall. She added, "It fought because it was told to, just like I did. It didn't deserve to die for that." The elder stared at her for a long moment, then finally gave a small nod. "Then perhaps we have something to learn from you." Ethan let out the breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. The council's eyes glowed brighter as they exchanged looks with each other. The room felt warmer now, heavier with meaning. Claire stood her ground, quiet and steady, as if this was exactly where she belonged. The council dismissed Claire and Ethan after a long silence. The guards led them back out of the hall and into the cool streets of the city. The sunlight was softer now, casting long shadows across the strange buildings. Claire walked ahead, quiet but alert, while Ethan followed, glancing around nervously. The crowd was thinner than before, but he could still feel the eyes of the Varathi on them as they passed. They reached their quarters, and the guards left them alone. Claire sat on the edge of her bed and untied the coil of rope from her waist. She set it on the table next to her blade and stared at them for a moment. Ethan stood by the window, watching the floating ships drift across the sky. The silence between them stretched on until Ethan finally spoke. "They're afraid of you now," he said softly. Claire didn't look up. She began wiping the dust from her blade with slow, careful movements. "They should be." Ethan turned to face her. "What happens next? Do you think they'll keep testing you?" Claire glanced at him briefly. "Of course, they won't stop until they understand us, or until we give them a reason to stop." Ethan frowned and walked over to the table. "But you already proved yourself. You beat their apex beast. You showed them we're not weak." Claire set down the blade and leaned back slightly. Her eyes stayed fixed on the wall, as though she could see something far beyond it. "That was just one lesson. Now they'll want to see if I can keep up." Ethan sat in the chair across from her, folding his hands together. He didn't know what to say. Part of him wanted to tell her she didn't have to keep proving herself. But another part of him knew that wasn't true. This was how things worked here. If they wanted respect from the Varathi, Claire would have to earn it over and over again. That night, Claire didn't sleep much. She sat at the window, staring out at the city lights. She watched the shadows of the guards moving along the streets below and listened to the faint hum of the floating ships above. She could feel the weight of the day still pressing down on her, but she didn't let it show. In the morning, a guard came to fetch them. He spoke little, only saying that the council had called them again. Claire rose and tightened her boots without a word. Ethan followed, trying to match her calm, but his hands kept clenching at his sides. The great hall was full when they arrived. The elders were already seated on their platform, their eyes glowing in the dim light. The crowd behind them was larger, this time with more of the city's people gathered to watch. The air felt heavier than before, as if everyone already knew what was coming. The elder with the long curved horns rose to speak. His voice filled the hall. "Human," he said, his eyes on Claire. "You surprised us." The sun was beginning to set when Claire and Ethan returned to their quarters. The weight of the day's events still hung heavy in the air, but neither of them spoke much as they walked through the quiet streets of the alien city. The guards that followed them seemed to be even more watchful now, their eyes never leaving Claire for long. It wasn't a look of suspicion, but something else, respect, perhaps, or fear. Ethan felt a knot tighten in his stomach. The council had made their point. Claire had faced the two Tyrax and won again, but they hadn't stopped there. The elders wanted more. They wanted to see how far she could go. It wasn't about proving humanity's worth anymore, it was about pushing her limits. As they entered their quarters, Claire took off her boots and dropped them near the door. She walked over to the small table and poured herself a glass of water without saying a word. Ethan sat down on the edge of the bed, his eyes still lingering on her. "You know they're not going to stop, right?" he asked after a long silence. Claire took a sip from her glass and nodded slowly. "I know. They'll keep testing you, pushing you to see how far you'll go." Ethan's voice was almost a whisper. "And if you keep passing, they'll want more, until they break you." Claire put the glass down and turned to look at him. "They don't get to decide how far I go. Only I do." Ethan stared at her, his mind racing. She was right, of course, but he didn't know how much longer she could keep doing this. She wasn't a machine. She was human, and humans he knew had limits. "I don't want to see you hurt," Ethan said quietly. "I don't want them to destroy you just to prove a point." Claire's gaze softened. She walked over to him, her steps light on the floor. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch firm but comforting. "I'm not going to let them destroy me, but I'm not going to let them think they can control me either." Ethan looked up at her, his brow furrowed. "But what if they keep pushing you? What if you reach a point where you can't win?" Claire smiled faintly, her eyes dark. With determination, "Then I'll stop. When I can't win anymore, I'll stop. But not before." He didn't know how to answer that. He wasn't sure he could understand it, but he trusted her. He had to. They had come this far together. And no matter how hard it got, he wasn't about to give up on her now. Claire sat down next to him and let out a long breath. "Let's rest for now," she said. "Tomorrow will bring something new. I can feel it." Ethan nodded, though a part of him wasn't so sure. The way things were going, he wasn't sure if they would ever have a day without another challenge hanging over them. That night, neither of them slept well. Claire lay awake in her bed, staring up at the ceiling. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the arena again, saw the Tyrax charging toward her. She could still feel the adrenaline rushing through her veins. But it wasn't just the fight that kept her awake. It was the nagging thought that, no matter how many times she proved herself, the council would never stop testing her. She would always be under their watch, always be forced to prove herself, over and over again. But Claire was used to pressure, used to being the underdog, She had spent her whole life fighting for survival, for recognition. This was just another test, one she would pass, just like the rest. The next morning, they were summoned again. Claire had barely finished her breakfast when the guards arrived at their door. The council was waiting for her this time, as they walked to the great hall. Claire noticed something different in the way the guards moved. They weren't just following her. They were leading her, as though they were afraid she might run off. Or perhaps they feared something else, her becoming too powerful. After all, what did it mean when one human had the strength to face two apex predators and win? When they entered the council hall, the elders were already seated, their glowing eyes fixed on her. The air was heavy, as it always was, but today it felt like something more. The council was no longer just watching her. They were studying her. The elder with the curved horns stood first, his voice deep and filled with authority. "Human, you have done what no one has done before. You have proven that you are not weak. You have fought two of our greatest beasts, and lived to tell the tale. But we are not yet satisfied." Claire's eyes narrowed. She could feel the challenge in his words. It was not about respect anymore. It was about control. They wanted to see how much she could take. They wanted to see how far they could push her. "What is it you want from me?" Claire asked, her voice steady. The elder raised his hand, and the gates to the hall opened. This time, it wasn't a beast that entered. Instead, a group of aliens in strange armor marched in, carrying large, complex weapons. They were silent as they took their places in the center of the room, setting up what looked like a training course: obstacles, barriers, and sharp objects designed to test agility and speed. "We will test you again," the elder said, his voice almost a challenge. "This time, not with beasts, but with our best warriors." Claire stood still, her face unreadable. "Warriors," she repeated. "You want me to fight your best fighters?" "Not fight," the elder corrected. "Outlast them, survive. If you do, you will prove that you are not just a survivor of beasts. You will prove you are worthy of our respect." Claire didn't answer right away. She simply stepped forward, her eyes scanning the warriors now in position. She could see their stance, their readiness. They were skilled, but they were predictable. She had learned that much in her time here. "Let's get this over with," Claire said finally, her voice calm. The warriors moved forward, and Claire knew she had no choice but to meet them. This time, it wasn't about beating them, it was about surviving long enough to prove that she was more than just a fighter. She was a survivor, and she would do whatever it took to show that. The test began, and Claire wasted no time. She darted between obstacles, using the terrain to her advantage. She wasn't faster than them, but she was more flexible, more unpredictable. She used everything she had learned in the past few days to avoid being cornered, to outsmart her. Opponents, the warriors, attacked, but Claire kept moving, dodging their blows and striking back when she could. She wasn't trying to win the fight, she was trying to survive. She knew that if she could last long enough, the council would have no choice but to recognize her strength, not just as a fighter, but as something more. After what seemed like hours, the warriors finally backed off, exhausted and frustrated. Claire was breathing hard, but she stood tall, her eyes focused on the council. She had done what they asked. She had proven she could survive. The elder with the curved horns stepped forward again. "You have proven your worth, human. You are not only strong, you are resourceful, and for that, you have earned our respect." Claire nodded once, her face unreadable. She had done it. But as she looked at the council, She knew the challenge wasn't over. The city of Zalos, once full of noise and movement, felt quieter now. The people still watched her closely, but they didn't approach as much. Some of them even bowed their heads as she passed. The respect was there, but so was something else: fear. The council had made their point. Claire was not to be underestimated yet. Claire didn't feel like she had one. Not fully. She had proven herself in their eyes. But she knew the Varathi weren't finished with her. They never would be. Every time she passed one of their tests, they would only create harder ones. But Claire didn't mind. She was used to pushing herself. She had been doing it her whole life. The night after the warrior's test, Claire sat alone in their quarters, sharpening her blade. The sharp sound of the stone against the metal was almost calming, but it also reminded her of what was to come. Every new challenge, every new test, felt like a countdown to the next dot. Ethan had been quiet for a while, sitting on the edge of the bed and staring at the wall. He finally spoke, breaking the silence. "You've proven everything they wanted," he said, his voice soft but serious. "Why not just leave? We've done what we came for." Claire paused for a moment, her eyes focused on the blade in her hand. "We can't leave yet. Not until we know why they called us here in the first place." Ethan frowned. "They've tested you more than any human should ever be tested. You've survived everything they've thrown at you. What more do they want?" Claire stood up, walking over to the window. The city stretched out before her, dark and quiet in the fading light. The floating ships were silent now, drifting lazily in the sky. She could feel the weight of everything: the tests, the challenges, the eyes always watching. "We're not here just to survive," she said quietly. "We're here to learn why they're so obsessed with us, why humanity is suddenly so important to them." Ethan's gaze followed her as she stood by the window, his face troubled. "And what if they're just using you, testing you to see how far you'll bend before you break?" Claire didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned back to the room, her eyes searching for something in the shadows. "I don't know," she admitted, "but we can't leave without knowing what they really want from us." The silence between them stretched again, heavier now. Ethan could see the determination in her eyes, but he also saw the weight of doubt. Claire was strong, stronger than anyone he had ever met. But even she couldn't fight what she didn't understand. The next morning, they were summoned once more. The council had